there's two separate things to consider. And one, of course, is that kind of quintessential devotion towards the divine can be cultivated regardless of whom you're with. Yeah. And I think that's always a good line of defense, so to speak, so that there isn't hopelessness, right? Because you can have a very alive and erotic, so to speak, relationship with the divine via cards, via deities, via archetypes, right? So meaning you can orient your general disposition towards the divine, and find these portals into the experience like we did yesterday evening, so that there's a part of you that regardless of who comes and goes in your life, there is a constant. And you give that constant enough attention that you're never completely bereft, so to speak, right? And it can be fun, right? It can be like the cars. It doesn't have to be super serious. You don't have to go to church, right? So meaning, I mean, if you wanted to, but but it isn't divine. But that's not to say that it's not divine / erotic, right? That these are not mutually exclusive when you consider the fullness of your body, right? Like that's why sometimes in Tantra, in classic Tantra, they talk about the worship, via the body or through the body, because your body mind essentially can orient towards that big, that big he, to the point that you're never completely forlorn or hopeless. Right? And so I think regardless if you have a functioning relationship or not, that is a good thing to do, because also relationships, even the best relationships, have ups and downs. And if you don't have a through line, it can get very easy to get caught in something. Doesn't matter if it's some, stupid thing that gets you into trouble in real life, or, weird behaviors or, addictions or fantasies. People get into tough spots because they don't have a constant. And so it's good to cultivate that constant. Then with actual men in actual life, the thing you said with you're losing hope has a few components, one of which is, yes, once you're discerning and once you know who you are and what you want, not everyone is for you. Right? So not everyone's for you, and not everyone's going to fulfill the remit for the role, right? And then within that, we're of course battling our imprints, because typically what we find sexy and attractive is not necessarily what's best for that role, right? That's the other issue, which is why when we look at these cards, we look at the erotic, right, and the relational. And they're not always the same. Sometimes they match, but sometimes they don't. So I'm sure you've done this before, but it might be nice again, now that you've also done some of the, sati merging and things like that, if you could have a newly defined job description, right, so to speak, and then really very ruthlessly cull whatever doesn't fit the newly defined job description, and maybe go on a bit of a rampage. No. Go on a little bit of a rampage of seeing what's out there, right, from that place. Doesn't mean you have to have sex with everyone you meet, right? But like really quite, like you would go and look for an apartment or a job or something, right? Like, the old-fashioned way people circle things in newspapers, and then, it's a little bit like that, where you go, let's check this out. It's probably not quite it, but let's see this flavor, right? Because you can look at dating like a flavor practice, where you essentially go, how does this person feel in my body? How does this person feel in my, like, let's say, spiritual body, in my subtle body? You know, is there something there? Does it fit with this? No. Okay, moving on. No, and that might need a bit of concerted effort. This is, by the way, a common mistake people make. They go, well, if I just project the mask of my beloved on this man, he'll somehow fit to that. But of course he doesn't, because, you know, first of all, that's a lot to ask. And second, just because we think it should be so is not necessarily that it is like that. Right? So it's much better to do it the other way around, where you hold this constant and see if this fits. It doesn't have to fit all the way, it just has to at least move into the same direction. Yeah. No one man will fulfill all your needs and desires. Right? This is unfortunately also true. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be in a monogamous relationship. It just means you can't expect everything from that one human. Yeah. So yeah. Thank you. And then as far as the solar plexus goes, there's a very specific kind of a breathing that you can, you know, maybe at the end of a session or so can do, which is very simple, where you lay on your back, you have your knees somewhat, you know, on bolsters or something, and you take your hands and you put them on the side of your rib cage. And then how you're going to breathe, this takes a little while to figure out, is you breathe in a way, I can't talk and breathe in the same time. You breathe in a way that your ribs come out sideways. So it looks something like this. See that? So interestingly, that is a breath that does not involve the belly at all. So I have to essentially localize my breath around here and press outward. And that particular breath relaxes the solar plexus. And the way this feels is a bit like, let's see if I can do this, like this. It's not doing it. You know when you do a sheet and the sheet goes up and it makes this little bulge and then it comes out? That's what it feels like. It's a very specific sensation. When you lay down and you breathe like that, it feels like you're shaking out your solar plexus. It has a very, it's also very good for the nervous system. So that would be a breath to cultivate as a means of specifically relaxing the solar plexus. It's a good one for everyone as well. But particularly if you have tension in that area, this really relieves a lot of that. Yeah, well, solar plexus is all about push. It's all about, it's connected to the chin. You can always tell. When somebody's like this, they have like a very tight solar plexus. So, yeah. You like... Well, the answer to that is, of course, for you to not diminish the practice in your body. Now, that's easier said than done, of course. We're all human, unfortunately. You can practice and then you can bring it when you feel full, and be somewhat uncompromising in your display, so to speak, right? And then that will eventually create a slipstream. And also, this is for anybody who's going home, right, immediately. One of the things that happens is you don't realize, this is also to be said about transitioning in airports and stuff like that, but you don't realize how much of a bubble you've been in. You know you're in a bubble, but you don't know how much of a bubble till you come out, right? And so by the very nature of that, you will arrive more open than you left. And that's usually quite delightful for anyone who is encountering you at home, right? Simply because it's like, oh, right? It's more of you. And so you can capitalize. so to speak, on that moment of more of you by kind of letting yourself feel what more of you does, which is typically met with delight and there's more sexiness and stuff like that. But I mean, her husband essentially packs her off to retreats anytime he can. She's like, oh, I don't know if I can do 2 in a row. And he's like, go, I will do whatever. Right? Because she always comes back and it's amazing, right? Over time, you'll stabilize in that, but you can capitalize on that and go, oh, yeah, that's what that felt like. Let me do more of that. So that's the question for the second question, which is true for everyone. And I'll say a little bit more about transitioning. And then as far as polarizing with heart, sometimes we are, let's say, habituated to lose in men, this is easier to say because a lot of times men lose the erection literally and figuratively when the heart opens, because they're not connected necessarily. And this can also happen in women. That is not exclusive to men, because we also have a whole fantasy life typically that happens in the body and the mind in some way that doesn't really actually need the heart, because it's a fantasy and you don't love a fantasy, right? I mean, some people have these, unicorn kind of fantasies that involve love, but, being swept away by the white knight. But nonetheless, it's not a real, actual human. It's not an actual human, so the opening of the heart isn't accounted for in the nervous system. So very often, the polarization has a certain amount of commodification attached to it, where you're essentially using the image or the person or whatever, it's like to feed that part of the fantasy that then creates the erotic thing. So that's why yesterday also we did the bit of pleasurizing the sensation of the body, but also there was the heart. And it might feel a bit less sexy in the beginning, but over time, as the heart kind of becomes a natural part of that, then it becomes easier. So, but in the meantime, just enjoy the melting, gooey, yes, yeah. So, the golden heart. Shorter is better, right? Bianca and I talked about this in a different context yesterday. You don't ever want to wear out your nervous system to the point where the next time you want to step up to practice, your body goes, oh, no, come on, right? So you always want to kind of leave the nervous system wanting a tiny little bit more than you're giving it, right? Instead of the other way around, where you're stretching further than you should stretch. While that is a common tactic, it's actually, in the long run, doesn't allow for sustainable engagement at all, right? And so I would say, if you know that that's the case, set yourself some really low ball time limit. Well, here's the thing. This is what I was going to say at the end of this. Obviously, as you go out there, it's going to be a bit jarring, right? Simply because you are highly sensitized. And so one way around the inevitable shutdown is to do something like you did when you went out on Sunday, where you become secret agents of love, right? Where you essentially don't concern yourself with your own stuff. You don't walk around going, oh my God, I'm so sensitive, this is too much, oh my God, I can't. But you go, oh, I have extra. Let me distribute the extra, because there's so much more where this is coming from. Let me just leave a little bit here and a little bit there and make that person smile and say something extra here. And then that way you kind of inoculate yourself against that horrible feeling. And that tends to help also when you come home, right, where you essentially just give a bit of extra of your fairy dust, your extra sparkle, so that you don't get into that lack. I'm not understood, I can't be myself, like all the stuff that we do. No, obviously we can't be that on a daily basis sustainably yet, but over time you'll be more and more stable in certain domains, and then there's still moments where that's not appropriate, but where it is appropriate, you'll be more stable. But in the meantime, you'll sprinkle some fairy dust on the planes and trains and automobiles.